Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who has gotten a lot of requests to talk about Cavalcade by Black Midi. I think those requests have come because I have been cataloging the post-punk scene over the last couple of years. And I've actually been working hard to try to come up with some kind of working theory or even terminology to define this moment in post-punk music. The term I settled on was 20 post, indicating the post-punk of the 2020s, and I really outlined it in my video on the album by Squid, and I'll include a link to the Squid video up there if you haven't seen it. This will be something of a companion piece. In that video, I talked about how this movement is very guitar-led, often avoiding power chords, going for strange chords or for single notes, sort of a combination of clean and clear, dissonant and not, always some kind of complicating factor to the music, be it some instrumentation or time signatures, vocalists that are usually adjacent to spoken word or at least downplayed. And in general, I've been treating this as an international movement, talking about Viagra Boys and Proto-Martyr, as well as all of these groups out of England. But I think it is important to focus on this local aspect, the windmill scene from Brixton, which this is how much research I've done. I believe Brixton is a part of London. Is that correct? I know it's in England. Okay, I'm tempted to take this out because I'm showing my ignorance, but as I like to say, my ignorance is profound. The point is this, and I'm not just doing that as a way to get engagement, because like 1,000 British people will be like, yes, Brixton, I just know the song from The Clash. That's all I know Brixton from. So there's this one particular place, this one club, and apparently it is the place where all of this music from London has been coming from, where Black Country New Roads, where Squid, and where Black Midi have come from. So I do think it is fair, while I wouldn't want to call this entire moment the windmill, the windmill music, it is, I would say, necessary to recognize that there is a certain thing happening. Just like grunge was not located exclusively in Seattle, this movement is not located specifically at the windmill in Brixton, but it is safe to say that it is the epicenter. But I will emphasize that I think that there's a thing that unites this windmill group, which makes it different than some of the other music. And this raises a question that I love to ask on this channel. Does technical proficiency come at the expense of emotional weight, of songwriting? There's a line when you're a very talented musician, when you're a classically trained musician, and it's not always clear where that line is. Where you're so good at doing something, you Ian Malcolm, you don't stop to think if you should. As a very mediocre musician myself, who looked up to Neil Young my whole life, I actually played in a band briefly with a couple of musicians who would tour with Steve Vai at some point. I mean, very high level technical musicians. I'm not there. So I used to be kind of a snob against musicians who were, quote, too good at their instruments. I think of it as often being a kind of dividing line, right? Like, there's often one figure who's sort of the more natural, the less rehearsed, the less proficient in writing music or transcribing music, a little bit less technically minded, and their counterpart that is more technically minded. Think of Jimi Hendrix versus Frank Zappa, Radiohead versus Muse, Led Zeppelin versus Rush, Grateful Dead versus Phish. All of these second bands are bands that I have had a natural inclination to resist. And all of these bands from this windmill scene are right there on that line. Black Midi is insane. The stuff that they're playing is at a level of complexity that is astounding and mind-blowing. When I was in high school, there was a division amongst my friends and I. Those who loved Leo Kottke and all kinds of, Jaco Pastorius and Weather Report and all that kind of prog rock, technical music, and then the other ones of us who are too cool. This album, and all three of these albums, this whole scene, really is right on that line. Where there's I like to think of it as a knob that you can turn up and down, the prog knob. And it's sort of in this case, in Black Midi, it's sort of broken off. It is by far the furthest to that extreme of technical proficiency and of sort of listening and making people who are happy to be at a music store trying out guitars. Like that kind of musician hears this music, oh bro, oh that's sick, oh that's sick, oh that time signature, oh that pause. But I don't think it should be dismissed. That's a stupid thing to say because I only do positive reviews, so it's not like I'm gonna come out here. And I will, at the end of this video, provide you a ranking of these three groups. Who's number one, who's number two, who's number three in the windmill scene, according to some random jackass in Western New York. That's me. The thing about this album is that even though it goes as far to that side, I mean, really on the line, for me to be almost unlistenable, it's so technically proficient, is the lyricist, is the singing. Because the singer is like a weird punk crooner. So in my family, people tend to love crooners. I don't know why, I don't know what happened. But my wife and my daughter love crooners, and they ended up really liking this album in a very deep way, in sort of an unexpected way. So I think that this is this nice, odd element, which is added into the rest of it. And when I say that it's too technically proficient, it's actually not entirely true. Certain songs are on that line, other songs are not. What makes it such a wonderful album to listen to is it's able to breathe. It does things that are super, right? That kind of like, all right, chill. But then it mixes it up with slower songs or songs that are more developed. So, is there a trade-off between emotional weight and technical proficiency? For all three groups, I would say no. They have done it. My problem with the lyricist is that, to me, I didn't understand anything he was saying when I didn't have the lyrics in front of me. Now, I don't know if that's just because I don't speak British. I don't know if it's because of the mixing of the album, but when I read the lyrics, it was actually kind of a discovery that he is quite a good lyricist. But probably my favorite band of all time is Radiohead, and I don't know any of their lyrics either until I read them. So, you know, I think Amnesiac is probably my favorite Radiohead album, and I probably know about 10% of the lyrics. So, you know, maybe it's kind of part of this sort of cryptic, poetic, smart distance, maybe part of a British tradition. Jesus, no. I don't want to say it's a British tradition. That sounds stupid and lame. Okay. So, let's get into the album more properly. Let's talk about your homework. So if you don't know, on this channel, I give you one song to listen to that I think is a good example of what makes an album great. Before I do that, I would like to tell you, please subscribe to my channel. It does matter to me that I have subscribers. It makes me happy every time I see that number go up. And please smash the like bucket. Just take the bucket and just hit it with a hammer. And tell me in the comments, what did you like about this video? Or what did you not like? That's cool too. So the song I'm going to be assigning is called Diamond Stuff. It's kind of an unexpected one. It's the beginning of the second side. It's probably not going to be one of their singles, but I think it is the best usage of their virtuosity, of their dynamism that you hear throughout the album. Because if you're able to do you're able to do that, you have to show you can do other stuff as well. You have to show you can chill, you can write, you can give stuff space to breathe. And in this song, just this impossibly tender acoustic guitar on these high strings and these high notes on this piano. I don't know how they make this sound. Quite often on the album, I will go, how did they make this sound? I don't know if that's a quality of the production or quality of the musicianship, but I don't know. I don't know anything else that I've ever heard that sounds like the first 30 seconds of Diamond Stuff. And it has a clarity and a cuttingness to it and a sharpness to it, which does remind me of Diamonds. I'm going to give you the lyrics that open up this as a good example of the poetic and cryptic lyrical stylings of the lead singer, whose name I forgot. It's a weird last name. It's like Kremp or Plurk. And before you put in the comments, hey dude, do your research. I don't do research. I read the lyrics, I listen to the music. I'm trying to give it to you as raw as I can because I find that more interesting than telling you they were founded in 2000. Who cares? So these lyrics that are quite well written. Only when the sun is, and only when the sun is ours. The opening lyrics starting off with and in medias res. Didn't take long to find out I am a husk made up of diamond stuff. Now, according to Lyric Genius, this has something to do with some book that was written recently, but still I like this idea, you know, that we're all made out of the same material, and this couch and the bricks are made of the same material as human beings. But just this sort of like, I am a husk made of diamond stuff, it's nice because we are husks, and that idea of being sort of worthless and empty, but also made up of the stuff of diamonds, something valuable and precious. It's sort of one of, if I could pick up any themes from this whole album, it does seem to be a lot about what is one's worth. And not like monetarily, but like one's worth as an artist, one's worth as a person, and this really is in there. And then, after he sings that line, it becomes this, almost sounds like a soundtrack. Like, almost like orchestral. It reminds me a little bit of the Popeye soundtrack, weirdly enough. And he sings, I don't seem to bleed this time. And then it cuts out again and it's just the guitar. And then the drums start playing and the orchestra hits some weird discordant notes until there's kind of this blaring sound, and then the drums really get going, and then we have like a full jazzy section. And if you just spend, one of the times I listen to this album, I just listen to the drums, just to hear, he doesn't drum like Keith Moon, okay? You know, Keith Moon just does fills. But there is a kind of energy to the way that he's drumming, to the way that he uses fills and the way that he uses his drums that reminds me of that sort of frenetic, like restless feeling. Just lots of great fills everywhere, just constantly going, constantly working. This becomes layered with these voices in the back, which are singing something, but I can't hear. And then it just becomes a jam, and like the guitars come in, and there's like, they build up crescendos and then take the crescendos out. This happens all the way throughout the album. And it's just this beautiful song that has taken you on this whole journey where you started off with those sounds I was talking about, and now we're in the middle of some kind of Derek Smalls jazz odyssey that's completely unexpected, and with all these small crescendos that build up and dissipate. It is very dense. And I don't know how long this video is going to be, but it could have been a lot longer because there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say, like, just musically, just what's happening within each song. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the album, the other 7 tracks. It opens up with a track called John L, which apparently is supposed to stand for John 50. So I thought it was initially going to be a song about John Lennon, which I thought was weird. And I thought maybe it was a song about John Legend, which would have been weirder. And then I thought it might be a song about John Lee Hooker. But no, it's about someone named John 50. I can't quite figure out these lyrics. It's some kind of weird cultish thing here. But this is an example. This turned me off a lot. When I heard the song the first time, I was like, ooh. This reminds me of music in the 90s that I didn't like. Like the way he's talking through things reminds me of like the Butthole Surfers. You know, just like talking with this weird Scottish accent, maybe? I don't know. And just like hyper funk music. Just really intense. It actually reminded me the most of Primus, which Primus is a mostly forgotten band now. They were very fun to watch in concert, and I did like them for a while, but that kind of 90s weird, ironic speaking, and then very, very technical music. This is the most technically proficient song on here. They have these pauses that just last for like too long. It was funny, I was driving through the village near my house, and like we stopped and there was a pause, and the car next to us was listening to Without You by Nilsson. Great song. And so it was like, if living is without you, and it came back. A nice thing they do is with one of the pauses, they actually have like a rumble underneath, and it adds to the sort of cinematic feel. Very often throughout this album, I felt a cinematic feel. So this is one thing I was going to do. You see here on my notes, describe instrumental part in detail. I'm not going to do it. You just have to listen. It is so much. I'm actually going to contact my friends Joe and Ben and Mark and all my friends who I used to make fun of for liking music that was too good, that was too technically proficient, because I think this is the kind of album we could have all bonded on, because it's cool enough and there's good enough songwriting that it would have placated me. But this is just, this jam at the end, there's just polyrhythms and different instruments and like guitar and drums and bass, and the idea of trying to play it sounds impossible. I imagine seeing it in concert is both aggravating and exhilarating. I imagine it's aggravating because like you're nervous about them being able to pull it all off. So I'm not going to describe it in great detail. You just have to listen. The next track is called Marlene Dietrich. And this is where I realized I love this band. Because I just went through this whole like spoken word, like, don't forget, come on down street, right? That kind of 90s funk stuff. And then we have this crooner song dedicated to Marlene Dietrich. It felt like a totally different singer. This jazzy guitar and the drums come in. It actually reminded me a little bit of Divine Comedy in the way that it's sung. Ends with this cool kind of climax. And the lyrics are all about Marlene Dietrich. She whispers demurely from the Blue Angel, the song we all know, the one we've paid for. And I want to thank Black Midi. I don't know the name of your lead singer, which is bad, but this did inspire me to watch Blue Angel, the movie, the 1930 movie by with Marlene Dietrich, with my family last night. I watched it with my daughter and my wife, and have you seen that movie? Oh, you have, Black Midi, because you wrote the song. Have you, viewers? Whoa! Like, apparently it was the first sound movie in German. And I was anticipating it just being like a story about this professor who falls in love with a cabaret singer, and it ends poorly. And I sort of had an idea of how it was going to play out. But this movie ends. This is one of the most emotionally harrowing movies I have ever seen. The Doctor and Mrs., my wife, she had to stop watching. My daughter was covering up her head going, "Dad, why are you making us watch this?" It is an amazing, just the pathos in this movie is incredible. The amount that you feel for this professor. And it's because he was a silent actor, and so it's all quiet at the end. Anyways, if you have thoughts about The Blue Angel, if you've ever seen it, definitely watch it. It is available for free on YouTube, but that's the English version. It's better to watch the version in German. They film them simultaneously. But definitely, the reason why, this song isn't about the Blue Angel. But I was curious because Marlene Dietrich, she gives off this certain air, this sort of like strength and sadness. And I was curious if listening to the song in conjunction with one of her best-known movies would have some kind of effect. And it absolutely does. So you want more homework? Watch Blue Angel. It's going to bum you out. It might ruin your day. 1930 Germans. My daughter goes, "I thought only French movies were like this." It was funny. I was talking about it today with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, it was amazing. I wish I hadn't seen it." Okay, the next track is called Chrondomalacia Patella. And now we're back to the stuff. But this is great, just like it's like a combo punch where you get the laid-back stuff and the energetic stuff and the funky punk guitars. It's kind of goofy and fun. Like there's this almost like a siren sound. All three of these groups, there's a playful nature to them. And maybe it's just because they're a bunch of, young, I think they're all dudes, young dudes who are rock stars and friends with each other and have a place to be the coolest people on earth. So there's just a lot of like fun stuff to this album, especially on this song. Then it becomes a very tight guitar licks. Like the guitar and the drums have to be so tight, just so tight. But then he comes in with a crooner voice. And I don't know, I wrote on my notes, and I don't know if I stand behind it. Maybe you can tell me in the comments. This again reminds me of late Bowie. I mean like 90s and on. This sort of avant-garde torch songs that David Bowie was writing. Like the jazz, I don't know. But then the song becomes like heavy metal and becomes like punk by the fourth verse. It becomes almost thrash metal. And then it ends with a slide whistle sound, although it's done on a keyboard. It's just a reminder of all the places you've been on this song. This song takes you everywhere. Next track is called Slow. And it starts fast. The drummer is working very, very hard. At times, and I've said this for both these other groups as well, I think Philip Glass is a pretty important influence. The kind of like bizarre, kind of arpeggiated, offbeat or odd rhythms. Apparently the song is about the slowness of death. That's an interesting theme. And then there's a guitar solo, like an actual guitar solo. And then there's this amazing moment. And this is what I'm talking about, why the album is so great and so rich. There's a moment where the voice echoes the bass and kind of slides down and sort of echoing the sliding down of the rest of the song. And the drummer's doing interesting stuff at the same time. And he's just singing, I Guess I'll Wait. It's an amazing moment that this album is filled with. These just little snapshots, these little like gems of production and songwriting. Next track is Diamond Stuff, which I've already described in some detail. And then Dethroned, which is great. It starts off with the saxophone and then this drum intro. It's almost like a solo. I had a long discussion with my son, who's a much better drummer than I. And he was saying that this beginning is good. It's particularly interesting, the stuff he's doing with these kind of like partial rolls. But later in the song, he's telling me how the drummer is, they're playing in 6/8, but he's doing his fills in 4/4 and managing to get them to work together. I am going to have to take his word for it because I'm good enough to play with Neil Young. I'm not good enough to play with Black Midi. So it is quite an interesting drum things all the way throughout here. It feels to me like they're just trying to make sure the drummer could get a song that's really his song. And there's these crazy guitar runs with the bass and the drums. It's all there. It gets more and more intense as it goes along, like scratching sounds with the guitars. And then almost a weird psychedelic thing happens with the guitar before we have these arpeggiated chords being played, I believe, on a guitar, with the voice following it. And I've never seen them live. I haven't even watched any videos. Can they do this? Can they play this? Like, is the guitar player singing and playing these arpeggiated notes at the same time? Because if so, that is some serious virtuosity. Apparently this is a song about somebody who is falling. I guess that's another theme, you know, this whole theme about like people falling or people's worth, but also somebody who always ends up getting back again. Next track is called Hogwash and Balderdash. My thing. This is cool. It starts off with these like bells kind of going back and forth, and it turns out it's a song about two chickens. So maybe it's like a farm bell, and it seems like it's supposed to be an absurd song about chickens running away, but it actually feels more like criminals on the run. It feels like people feeling chased, people feeling unsafe. You know, the law is tracking them down, and there's able to be enough kind of like tension in here. More kind of Primus music. Again, just the bass is going super crazy. This feels to me like the song where they're really making sure the bass player can show that he knows what he's doing. Tempo kind of goes all over the place, and then it gets all crooner again until we hit like basically James Bond style hits. And then some crazy like Frank Zappa sounding moments, like Frank Zappa goofy, like circusy sort of style music. This album is exhausting in a good way. It's just there's so much to say. And then it ends with this big flourish that leads into the final track, Ascending Forth, the 11-minute epic, where really the punk crooner nature of this singer really comes out. Now it's interesting, this is about, it's spelled Ascending Forth, like ascending as in go forth, but it's also a musical thing. So I brought my guitar, Leroy, one of my guitars, and the ascending forth is actually one of the simplest things in music, one of the simplest intervals between music. If you have a guitar at home or a piano, like the best example is C to F. Okay? So like that, you know, I actually, I used to write a lot of songs for my band. None of them were very good, and they're all based on that. They're all based on that interval. They're all songs that were based on that, like going from C to F or going from G to C. Maybe the best example I could think of is Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is all based on the ascending fourth. That's an ascending fourth. That's an ascending fourth, and then that is an ascending fourth as well. The whole thing is just ascending fourths. So it's kind of this funny thing where we have this band that is insanely technically proficient and writing these songs and interesting time signatures and notes, and they're singing about the value of one of the simplest possible building blocks of pop music you could have. So I don't know. I don't really know what that is, except that this whole song appears to be a meditation on being an artist and having success. And the song builds so nicely with this jazz crooner singing, and the drums come in, playing something kind of unassuming in the back, but then by the end of the second verse, it's completely epic, and then it strips down again, and then there's strings everywhere, and then it becomes more and more sweeping and more cinematic, and I don't know, more and more just like that feeling that you're really listening to a band that knows what it's doing, is creating something interesting, and you get swept up by it. And throughout much of the album, that's how I feel. So there's my review. But while I get to the rank, I do have a Patreon in which I use money that is given to me to buy music. Do you see both these albums? I didn't pay for them. My Patreons paid for them. Patreons like Milos here, and Patreons like these people here. So thank you very much to my Patreons. I hope that's all legible. I am going to now rank the three bands. I'm gonna go number 1, Black Country New Roads. Maybe it's because it's the oldest and I've listened to it the most, but I really like the attitude of that the most. I like the songwriting the most, and I really like the way the singer. I like the singer's sort of attitude the most. I find it the most interesting. Then I'd say probably Squid, and then I'd say this. But in the family, it's actually the opposite. In the family, this is everybody's favorite. And then I would say, I don't know what the other order is. So there you go. Call to action. What is your ranking of the Windmill? Where do you put Black Country, Squid, and Black Midi? I am interested. I do read all the comments too. Okay, well then, I'm gonna pick one of my Patreons at random. For Mitras Owen, there's the camera.